All right. We just finished a discussion on Exodus 12 and the discussion towards the end. We got into circumcision. So we're discussing that right now. And Chase was up next to bring a point up.
No, I just wanted to kind of reiterate a little bit on as far as talking about Shaul. I mean, Kefa even kind of warns us about him a little bit in Second Peter. I mean, in 2 Peter 3:14-16, he basically says, and brother Shaul wrote to you according to the wisdom given to him, as also in all letters, speaking in them concerning these, in which some are hard to understand, which those who are untaught and unstable twist to their own destruction, as they do also other scriptures. I mean, Kefa even tells you that if you don't know Torah already or haven't already understood the scriptures, that listening to Paul's words will kind of contort your mind a little bit, more or less, because Shaul was given just to the Gentiles. You see what I'm saying? And he said to himself that he's not going to be a stumbling block to them. It's more, he wants to teach them the love of the Messiah first before he teaches them Torah, because Torah will naturally come to them in their spiritual walk. That's all I wanted to say, man.
I think that's good because this, I think, comes back to Passover and unleavened bread. Oh, sorry, we got frozen. But in the aspect of I think the biggest point, though, that we are trying to get to is the circumcision of the heart, right? There's obviously circumcision of the flesh. We see that as a covenant, and I will not dismiss that because I think it's very beautiful and there's something powerful that he's given to our father Abraham and the rest of our generations. But even deeper, again, like I was mentioning before, this physical and the spiritual, right? And he lays it out, let's say, for example, in Deuteronomy, verse 6, it says, Yahuwah your Elohim will circumcise your heart and the heart of your descendants.
Hey, Rick, again. Nothing. No. Hey, Rick.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can. I don't know at what point it ended. I'm not sure if you guys were able to hear me or not. Go ahead, Rick.
I'm just responding to Ken. He was calling my name, so.
All right, I'm gonna jump back in here. Because somebody's not muted. All right. So going back to Galatians, right? I want to show you guys a context here. I'm gonna try my best. I'm gonna give this a shot. All right. Really, the best way to learn this is to read Galatians from chapter 1 and go all the way to the end. That's really the best way to do it. And then you got to cross-reference this with like Acts 15 and stuff. But I'm going to try to stick to Acts chapter 5, the one that you brought up. Galatians 5, my bad. Galatians 5, verse 1, it says, stand firm, therefore. So everything he's been talking about from chapter 1 to here, he's basically starting to summarize it. So you got to understand chapters 1 to 4. But it says, stand firm, therefore, in the liberty by which Messiah has made us free, and do not be entangled again with a yoke of bondage. So right off the bat, what we're facing with here is the good news that comes through Messiah and the gospel that was being preached by the true apostles. And you have some type of yoke of bondage he's talking about that he's comparing that to, or it's like verses, you know what I mean? So you have the right gospel versus the false gospel. And verse 2 says, listen, I, Shaul, tell you that if you receive circumcision, Messiah will profit you nothing. Here's where I want to cross-reference to get context. Acts chapter 15, verse 1, because this is a big meeting, meeting that they had regarding this issue. The whole chapter 15 is good to read, but verse 1 says, some men came down from Judea and taught the brothers, quote, unless you are circumcised after the custom of Moses, you cannot be saved. So right off the bat, this is what we're fighting. We're fighting circumcision that saves you versus circumcision that's a commandment that you can do at any point in your walk because it's not the first step. You could be saved first and circumcised later because circumcision is not a prerequisite. And if I go to Acts 15, some people like to use this other passage that was here to say, oh, yeah, but there was another group. Verse 5. There's some people that say, oh, but look at verse 5 of Acts chapter 15. And Christians like to use this to say, this is why we don't need to obey the law of Moses. Verse 5, it says, but some of the sect of the Pharisees who believed. So in other words, these are guys who believed in the Messiah, but they were part of the Pharisees group. They rose up saying, it is necessary to circumcise them and to command them to keep the law of Moses, period. Which sounds like what we believe today, right? It sounds like our group. We believe that we should keep the law of Moses. But again, I'm gonna how do you say this? I'm going to plead with you to understand the context that both of these statements are in connection with the idea of keeping the law or circumcision being a prerequisite to save you as the first step to being declared righteous. Yeah. Hey, brother Cedric, shalom, my brother. My video camera is frozen right now. I just want to let you know we're recording right now, and the recording will be on YouTube. So if you want your video on, feel free to keep it on. If you don't, you can turn the video off. And right now we're discussing Shaul. We were discussing Passover and unleavened bread, and then we are getting into Galatians regarding circumcision, whether we should be circumcised today or not. That's the discussion. So we're Acts 15 right now. So I believe both of these groups, both the Pharisees in verse 5 and both this group that came from Judea, they're both teaching the same type of gospel. It's get circumcised first, and then you could be declared right. Versus the other gospel is, if you have faith first, if you believe in your heart, confess with your mouth, you're declared righteous in a moment, in an instant. You're my brother, you're my sister. All right. And then here's my proof that that none of the apostles were against the Gentiles keeping the law or learning the law. When you go down, when they say what they should do, verse 19, they had a prayer meeting and said, all right, so what should we be doing? What should we be teaching these Gentiles? What should we do? Verse 19 of Acts 15, it says, therefore, my judgment is that we do not trouble those from among the Gentiles who turn to God, but that we write to them that they abstain from pollution of idols, from sexual immorality, from what is strangled, and from blood. For Moses, from generations of old, has in every city those who proclaim him, being read in the synagogue every Sabbath. Verse 21 is always missed, is always skipped over. In other words, and let's just practice a little critical thinking here. If the judgment was that all they have to do is abstain from pollution of idols, sexual immorality, from what is strangled, and from blood, does that mean that they're allowed to steal? Does that mean that they're allowed to lie? Does that mean that they're allowed to murder? Because that's not mentioned in this list. So wouldn't it be right to say, wouldn't it be a righteous assumption that this is a good starting point, but it's not the end all be all, right? So it's a starting point, but verse 21. Now, if you read with that understanding, and now you read verse 21, forgive me, I lost my place. Verse 21. Now, if you read verse 21, knowing that that's a starting place, now read, for Moses from generations of old has in every city those who proclaim him, being read in the synagogues every Sabbath. This perfectly goes in line with the Messiah's commandment in Matthew chapter 23, verses 1-3. This is the Messiah speaking now. This is why I say I don't follow Paul. I don't say that to be disrespectful to Paul, but I say that as a message to say that if what Paul is saying contradicts what Messiah said, I'm not following him. But I don't believe that. I believe Paul was not preaching against what Messiah preached or what the Torah preaches. I think he was fighting a group of people who were making up their own good news. But here's what the Messiah said, and here's what I'm gonna believe these words more than I would Paul's words. Even if Paul was saying we shouldn't be circumcised at all, I'm gonna believe these words. Matthew 23, verse 1. It says, "Then Yahusha spoke to the crowds and to his disciples, saying, Upon the seat of Moses, the Pharisees and the scribes sit." So the Pharisees and the scribes sit on the seat of Moses. "All which they say unto you, observe and do it. But don't do their works, because they say and they don't do." And it goes on and on. They bind heavy and hard to bear burdens and lay them on men's shoulders, but they themselves will not lift a finger to help them. But all their works they do to be seen by others. That falls perfectly in line with Galatians chapter 6, where you got these Judaizers circumcising Gentiles, and all they're doing it is to boast, to show how many people they circumcised. So we're dealing with the same pharisaical, man-made, kind of spirit here. The same spirit Messiah was against is the same spirit that the Apostle Paul and the other apostles are fighting against as well, because that same spirit is still trying to infiltrate the disciples and the followers of Messiah. I hope that makes sense. But if you continue reading Matthew 23, it goes on and on about all the outward appearance stuff. These guys are focused on outward appearance things. So physical circumcision is of the flesh. It's an outward appearance. Wearing fringes is an outward appearance thing. And it goes on and on. Verse 5, "But all their works they do to be seen by others. They make their tefillin broad and enlarge the fringes of their garments, and love the place of honor at feasts, the best seats in the synagogues." You know what I'm saying? That's like the churches today that have a pastor's parking spot, the pastor's chair, the pastor's throne. He has a special seat he sits on the platform. You know what I mean? While everybody else sits on the floor. And, all this other Greco-Roman style, of stuff going on. You know what I mean? And this is all influenced by Rome was over Israel during the times of Messiah. Rome was having authority over Israel. So they're already way influenced a lot by a Greco-Western, culture. And they were embracing a lot of that stuff. So it goes on and on and on. If you keep going down, I want to point out one more thing in the book of Matthew 23 real quick. Let's see. This whole chapter goes in line with what we're reading in Galatians, by the way, and Acts 15. But let's see. I want to point one more thing out. Where is it? I'm down on 23. Okay, verse 23. "Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you tithe mint, dill, and cumin, and have left undone the weightier matters of the law, justice, mercy, and faith." You see? So that means a lot of the stuff that he was just listing, it's not that the Messiah was against it and saying, don't do these things anymore. It wasn't that. That wasn't the context. The context was that the Messiah was saying, you guys are doing all these lesser important matters of the law. Not that they're not important. It's just that they're less important. So that means they're still part of the list of things to do. However, you guys are forgetting these more important matters of the law, and you're putting a higher priority on these lesser matters of the law. You're more concerned with how you look on the outside than how you are living on the inside. And that is the proper context of what we're dealing with in Acts 15 and in the book of Galatians. And every time Paul is, preaching this seemingly lawless gospel, it's not that he's lawless. It's not that he's against the law. What he is against is people who preach the law without faith, without mercy, and without love. He is 100% against that, and all of us should be. And there are a lot of people in the Hebraic root and Messianic and whatever else you want to call it out there that are loveless, merciless, and faithless people that don't know how to love their brothers and sisters, but they look good on the outside. They got nice robes I want to get. They got some garments. I love them. I love the garments. I want to get me some garments with the fringes around the hem. You know what I'm saying? I want to get me a long garb. You know, the Muslims are doing their prayer walks all over the neighborhood. I want to do my prayer walks too. I want to show Yahuwah's name in Hebrew and walk all over my neighborhood. You know, I do. I don't think that's a bad thing. You know, but if you're focusing only on the outward, but you're like filthy rags on the inside, your heart is nasty. I mean, that's what we're fighting against. So with that being said, I mean, if you start reading Galatians and all of Paul's letters with that in mind, it should start coming to life. So if we go back to Galatians 5. Yes, verse 3. Yes, I testify again to every man who receives circumcision that he is a debtor to do the whole law. If you're going to pinpoint one thing, circumcision of the law, and you can't be saved unless you're circumcised, then you have to treat every commandment the same way. And in other words, it's impossible. Nobody has ever walked from birth till death sinless except for one person, the Messiah. So Paul is being sarcastic here. He's saying you're a debtor to do the whole. If you want to follow that gospel, then you guys need to follow it perfectly, without flaw, in order to be saved. Which is obviously not what Paul believed, because he said we wrestle, walk in the spirit, not according to the flesh. But why do I do the things I don't want to do? I do the things that I don't want to do, and I don't do the things that I want to do, blah, 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 right? So there's this battle against the flesh, because we're still in the flesh, and the spirit. So until we die, we're always going to be wrestling. We're always going to be fighting against that. Verse 4. You are alienated from Messiah, you who desire to be justified by the law. You have fallen away from grace. Now, this sounds contradictory to what he preached in the book of Romans regarding being justified by the law. Let me go there real quick. Yeah, I know I'm ranting right now. I'll stop for a second, but Romans 2, verse 13. This is Paul speaking. He says, for it is not the hearers of the law who are righteous before God, but the doers of the law will be justified. So that sounds contradictory. And then later on in the book of Romans, he says, we're not justified by the law, we're justified by faith. So which is it, Paul? I'm going to tell you how I perceive this and how it all makes sense and it all comes together and it's not contradictory. And Paul could be right in saying everything that he's saying. In other words, there is a type of righteousness that comes by obeying the law. If you have faith, if you're merciful, if you're loving your brother and your sister, then there is a justification that comes from obeying the law. That's without question. The prophets, all the prophets of old, David, everyone loved the law and understood that obedience to the law was essential to proving your love and your righteousness with Yahuwah. That's like without question. However, we're not justified by the law if we lack faith. We're not justified by the law if we lack mercy. We're not justified by the law if we lack love for our brothers and sisters. And that's what Paul is preaching. So James says, without faith without works is dead. You know what I mean? So it's like faith is first. Faith has always been first. With Abraham, Noah. I mean, you go on and on. We can go all the fathers of faith, Hebrews chapter 11, I think. All the forefathers of our faith, they were all faithful people, but they were also obedient people to literal laws and commandments and statutes. So they go together. It's a package deal. So anyway, with that being said, I'm gonna stop real quick. Let comments and questions be asked. Sean and Julie.
I just wanted to say I completely agree with you. I think I misunderstood what you were saying, and I'm glad we're on the same level here.
it takes explanation. It's a hard thing to get with the one-liner I gave you guys. It's very deceiving. It's like this is one of those topics you can't do a one line with. And
Right.
so I rightfully I understand your desire to get more explanation, because it's no matter what way you say it, even on the good side. Oh, we're saved by faith. We're saved by faith and not by works. That's a true statement. But that one liner is not enough. Because now people will go away thinking, oh, we don't have to obey anything. We could just sit back and just believe and live however we want. You know what I mean? So it requires us to bring all the scriptures regarding this matter and bring it together, you know? Paul is definitely not lawless. He is 100% Book of Acts. There's a chapter in Book of Acts, I think it's 21 or something like that, where he's being accused of hating the law and hating circumcision. He's like, no way, guys. I'm totally for it. Like, I am for this stuff, man. I believe the law. I have never spoken anything evil against the temple. You know what I mean? So he's in agreement with these things. But what he doesn't like is the wolves. No, I didn't read chapter 6 yet.
I just think that, like, with everything that we've been studying with you so far and everything that we studied on our own, it seems like there's always a physical manifestation of the stuff that's going on spiritually. So it's twofold. It has to be both. It has to be together, a physical circumcision, but just as importantly, or in my opinion, even more so, the circumcision of the heart would lead to you obeying in all things. Because you can have someone that was circumcised as a child that had nothing to do with it. Their parents did it for them. That doesn't mean that their heart is right before the Messiah. It doesn't mean that their heart is ever going to be right before Messiah. That does not save a person. And you could have a person that isn't circumcised, that comes into the knowledge of Messiah, falls madly in love with the truth of the good news, and just isn't there yet. And I thank him that he is long suffering. I'm thanking, that he understands your situation, that there's, financial matters to be worked out and just details to be worked out. But if you were to die today, that's where the circumcision of the heart is going to come into play. And I just think it's really, really important. Everywhere in scripture, it seems like there's a physical manifestation of something spiritual that he's got going on inside. And I don't think you can have one without the other.
I really like that. And I agree, because there's just sometimes I feel like we need to see what we're learning. And so I think Yahuwah knows that. And he's like, I will show you what I'm trying to say, But also, I know he kept mentioning, and I just want to reference, since I know it's being recorded, the Galatians 6. Galatians 6, 11 to 14, I guess, says, see with what, this is who he's regarding to, see with what large letters I write to you with my own hand. As many as desire to make a good showing in the flesh, they compel you to be circumcised, only that they may not be persecuted for the cross of Messiah, or the stake of Messiah. For even they who receive circumcision do not keep the Torah themselves, but they desire to have you circumcised, that they may boast in your flesh. And it's important, I think, for me personally, when I was going through Galatians, all these questions came up. And then this last chapter really settled me. I was like, oh, how do I say it? I felt like Galatians had to be read backwards, because I was understanding who Paul was talking to. They weren't even keeping Torah. Like, these dudes were not even keeping Torah, but their highlight was circumcision. Like, that's the craziest thing. It's like, I don't know, people saying, okay, you got to keep the Sabbath, but not keeping any of the other stuff. It's just like, they just pick out one thing and then just make it the highlight, and then that's everything. And then to them, that means that you're saved. And it's like, excuse you, back off. No. So I think there's reality of who he's talking to and who he's really coming against. And remembering, I remember a brother was saying, Shaul Paul was a Pharisee, and he says he was a Pharisee of Pharisees. And what was his first process that he was doing? He went out trying to kill and put in jail the brethren. That was he was zealous for that, to put into jail all the brethren. I mean, he went from city to city trying to get letters and all this stuff, persecuting the congregation. And these, I think, is the same aspect of these Pharisees, have that same mindset that Shaul had, because they didn't really fully have that that walk to Damascus experience that Shaul had, right? So they all start at the same point of being very pharisaical. I mean, don't get me wrong, some of these were very strong on the Torah and all that stuff, but adding burdens, and then the concept of Gentiles being able to come in. What? Oh, no, you need to prove yourself. You got to prove yourself to us so that we know that you're really brethren. You got to do this, and this, and this. So I think it's just kind of understanding who he's directing his audience to that kind of brings things together, because across different books, he says something to one group, but he does something with another. He says circumcision means nothing here, but he goes and circumcises. He says you can't be justified by the Torah, but then he goes when brethren come to him and say, hey, there's people that are saying you're against the Torah. And he's like, well, okay, I'll go ahead and pay for the Nazarite vow, which means that there was also going to be a sacrifice, an animal sacrifice, to prove, no, I'm not against Shaul. I'm not against the Torah. So it's really in line with the audience. And let's just put it in a natural day real quickly, because I know we got to go soon. If I'm talking, our audience is different, right? So if I talk to my mother is gentle, soft. She wants to hear the word. I can talk to her differently. I can mention Messiah versus someone that's straight rebellious and I need to hit hard on certain things. There's a different audience, and the way we present the gospel is a little different. And I think that's what Shaul means when I said I become all things to all men, because it's really based on your audience. You're getting the same message, but who are you talking to? And one last thing, I don't keep talking, but there was a guy that came in for a fellowship, and he kept being told, and it kept being drilled in his head, you have to, this exact thing, you have to keep the law. You have to keep the law. He didn't even fully accept the Messiah yet. So what do we have to do? The fellowship at the time said, the law is not going to do anything for you if you don't have faith in Messiah. We were saying the same thing Shaul was saying. Now, if someone just took those words of ours, they were like, oh, then you have to break Torah. No, that's not what we're saying. We're saying Messiah first. You haven't even accepted the one that died for you. You haven't even accepted that yes, you are in sin because of what Torah says, right? That's our mirror, but that is not your starting point. You need to repent, come into Messiah, believe in him, and then you start walking, so I think it's a matter of the audience. But go ahead, Sean and Julie.
So I just wanted to say real quick, the reason why I jumped the gun was because before we've been part of fellowships that were ripping
pages,
literal pages that were written by Paul out of their Bibles, and I think I was misunderstanding.
Deal breaker.
It was deal breaker. Like that was a deal breaker for us. So when you said I don't follow Paul, I think I just got a red flag, like PTSD from back then. Like,
Yep.
Out.
Totally understand. Thank you for enduring with my words and not running away real quick. I appreciate that, and I definitely understand that, bro. I do. I was part of groups like that. I was in groups like that, man, and I was like, whoa, this ain't for me. Nope, I'm not going that route.
Exactly.
Like there's like no endurance to try to really figure out and investigate if Paul is really against the law. Like I'm not going to drop the New Testament that quick. I'm going to try everything I can to investigate this and see if I can make sense of it with all my power, all my might before I divorce myself from this. So yeah, I totally agree, man. Hey guys, we got to head out. I'm going to stop the recording. I think that was a good session right there regarding Paul. I'm going to stop the recording.